It was Thursday, late afternoon, the kind of day where the light comes through the windshield at an angle that makes you squint, makes everything feel a little unreal. Mira Dalton sat in her rideshare car outside the main entrance of Mercer General Hospital, waiting for her next pickup. This was her life now. 4 to 6 years old, driving strangers around the city for gas money and rent. 3 years ago, she had a different life. A home, a husband, a name that meant something in this town. But Daniel died, and when he did, his family made sure she understood that the Dalton name was never really hers to keep. They took the house. They took the business. They took everything except the beat-up Honda she'd bought with her own money before they ever got married. So here she was, picking up passengers, keeping her head down, trying not to think too hard about how fast everything can fall apart. The app pinged. Hospital pickup. She pulled up to the passenger loading zone, rolled down the window, and waited. That's when she saw him. An elderly man, maybe mid-70s, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. A nurse was helping him toward the curb. He looked frail, tired, like someone who'd just been through something difficult. Mira unlocked the doors and glanced at her phone to confirm the ride. But when he reached the car and bent down to look through the window, everything stopped. His face went white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And then his cane slipped from his hand and clattered onto the pavement. The nurse reached for him, confused, alarmed. But he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Mira like he'd seen a ghost. And then he started to cry. Not quiet tears. Real, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep. His whole body trembled. Mira didn't know what to do. She just sat there, frozen, her hand still on the gear shift, her heart starting to pound in her chest for reasons she didn't understand yet. He steadied himself against the car door, his voice broken and hoarse, and he whispered the words that would shatter everything she thought she knew. You look just like the woman he described. You're Daniel Dalton's wife, aren't you? Her breath caught. Daniel. Her late husband's name, spoken by a man she'd never seen before in her life. She felt the ground tilt beneath her. How did he know? How could he possibly know? The nurse was trying to get him into the car, but he waved her off, his eyes never leaving Mira's. His voice cracked again. Please, I've been looking for you. For his family. For so long. He gripped the door frame, his knuckles white. I need to talk to you. Just 1 hour. Please. What I know about your husband, about what really happened to him, it will change everything. She should have driven away. She should have canceled the ride, locked the doors, and left him standing there. But she didn't, because something in his voice, something in the desperation and the grief in his eyes, told her that whatever he was about to say, she needed to hear it. And she was right. What he told her in the next hour didn't just change everything she believed about Daniel's death. It changed everything she believed about her life. 3 years ago, Mira Dalton had a different name on her mailbox. She had a front porch. She had Sunday mornings with coffee and a husband who kissed her forehead before leaving for work. 18 years of marriage. 18 years of building something small and steady. Daniel worked construction. Mira ran a craft business from their kitchen table, selling handmade jewelry online. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable. They had routines. They had plans. Then came the phone call. Tuesday morning, October. Daniel's supervisor, voice shaking. Scaffolding collapse. Daniel didn't make it to the hospital. Gone before the ambulance arrived. Mira's world didn't crack. It exploded. But she didn't get time to grieve. 3 days after the funeral, Daniel's parents showed up at her door with a lawyer and a locksmith. The Daltons were old money, the kind of family with streets named after them. Daniel was their only son, and they'd never liked Mira. Wrong background, wrong family, wrong everything. But Daniel had loved her, so for 18 years they tolerated her at family dinners, tight-lipped and cold. Now Daniel was gone, and so was their patience. The house was in their name. Daniel never put her on the deed. Everything inside, legally theirs. 1 week to pack her things and get out. Then Daniel's mother said it. The words that would haunt Mira for 3 years. You brought bad luck into this family. My son would still be alive if he'd never met you. Mira didn't fight back. No money for lawyers. No energy for arguments. She was drowning in grief, and they were holding her head underwater. So she packed what fit in her car, some clothes, a few photos, craft supplies, and left. Left the house. Left the neighborhood. Left the life she thought would last forever. The free fall was brutal. 2 months. That's how long her savings lasted. The craft business died. No space to work, no heart left to create. She took whatever job she could find. Waitressing, night cleaning. Eventually, rideshare driving because no one asked questions and the hours were hers. She sold everything. Her grandmother's ring. The camera Daniel gave her for their 10th anniversary. Furniture. Piece by piece. Her past disappeared into pawn shops, traded for rent money and gas. She ended up in a room above a laundromat on the east side. Thin walls. Cheap floors. The smell of detergent in everything she owned. Machines running until midnight, shaking the building. She couldn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark, listening to strangers' laundry tumble below, wondering how she'd gotten here. Double shifts whenever possible. Cheap food, ramen, gas station sandwiches. She stopped seeing friends. Couldn't afford coffee dates. Couldn't handle the pity in their eyes. She fought her grief alone in that tiny room. Nothing but laundry sounds below and the crushing weight of loss above. 3 years of this. 3 years of surviving, not living. And that Thursday afternoon at the hospital, Mira had no idea the old man crying at her window was about to blow her entire world open again. She had no idea the story she'd been telling herself about Daniel, about his death, about everything, was only half the truth. Mira pulled away from the hospital in silence. The old man, Mr. Hale, he'd said his name was, sat in the passenger seat, hands trembling in his lap. He gave her an address downtown, an office building near the financial district. She didn't ask questions. Not yet. Her heart was still hammering. Daniel's name in a stranger's mouth. The look on his face when he saw her. The desperation in his voice. Something was coming. Something big. And she wasn't sure she was ready for it. The drive took 20 minutes. Neither of them spoke. When they pulled up to the building, Mr. Hale reached for his wallet, but Mira stopped him. "You said you had something to tell me about my husband. So tell me." He nodded slowly. "Not hey. Please. Come inside. I need to show you something." She should have said no. Should have driven away. But she turned off the engine and followed him into the lobby, through security, up the elevator to the 9th floor. His office was small but neat. Papers stacked carefully on the desk. A window overlooking the city. And on the wall, a framed photograph. Mira's breath caught. It was Daniel. Younger, maybe 30 years old, covered in dust and debris, helping a man onto a stretcher. Other workers in the background, some bloodied, some sitting on the ground. Emergency lights flashing. Chaos frozen in a single frame. Mr. Hale stood beside her, staring at the photo like it was sacred. "That's me," he said quietly, pointing to the man on the stretcher. 15 years ago. Construction site collapse. Downtown renovation project. 4th floor gave way without warning. Steel beams, concrete, everything came down. 6 of us were trapped. He paused, his voice thickening. "Your husband pulled me out first. Then he went back. 3 more times. He didn't stop until everyone was out. Broken ribs. Crushed leg. I was unconscious by the time they got me to the hospital. But the others, they told me. They said a guy named Daniel stayed until the last man was safe. Then he disappeared before the paramedics could check him over. Before anyone could get his contact information. Before we could even thank him." Mira stayed at the photo. Daniel's face. Dirt-streaked. Exhausted. Determined. She'd never seen this picture. Never heard this story. Mr. Hale walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. Inside, a handwritten note on lined paper, edges worn and yellowed. He handed it to her carefully, like it might crumble. The handwriting was Daniel's. She'd know it anywhere. "Glad I could help. Stay safe. Daniel Dalton." That was it. No phone number. No address. Just his name. "He gave this to one of the workers before he left," Mr. Hale said. "I've been searching for him ever since. I wanted to thank him. I wanted to tell him what he did mattered. That collapse nearly destroyed my company. I was the site manager. It was my responsibility. But because of him, no one died. Because of him, we rebuilt. Because of him, I still have a business today. He turned to face her fully, tears welling up again. Your husband didn't just save lives that day, Mrs. Dalton. He saved an entire company. He saved my company, and I never got to tell him. Myra couldn't speak. Her throat was tight. Her hands shook as she held the note. Daniel never told her. Not once in all the years after. He came home that night. She remembered now, vaguely, dirty, exhausted, said there'd been an incident at work. She'd asked if he was okay. He'd nodded, kissed her cheek, and gone to shower. And that was it. He never mentioned it again. Why? Why would he do something like that and never say a word? Mr. Hale was watching her, his expression unreadable. There's more, he said quietly. Something I found out about his death. About the accident that killed him. Myra looked up sharply. What do you mean? He hesitated, then reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. An accident report. Official looking. Stamped and dated. The scaffolding collapse that killed your husband, he said slowly. It wasn't an accident, Mrs. Dalton. Someone made sure that scaffolding came down. And I think I know why. Myra's hands went cold. What do you mean it wasn't an accident? Mr. Hale set the accident report down carefully. I'll explain. But first, there's something else you need to see. He walked to the corner of the office where a steel vault stood against the wall. Old. Heavy. The kind with a combination lock that clicked as he turned it. Left. Right. Left again. The door swung open with a low groan. Inside, organized neatly in folders and binders, were stacks of documents. He pulled out a thick file and brought it to the desk. Myra watched, her pulse hammering in her ears. Stock certificates, partnership agreements, legal documents with Daniel's name typed across the top. After your husband saved us, Mr. Hale began, his voice steady but emotional. I tried to find him. I wanted to repay him. Not just with money. Anyone can write a check. I wanted to give him something real. Something lasting. He spread the documents across the desk. Hale Engineering was barely surviving back then. That collapse nearly destroyed us. Insurance companies, lawsuits, reputation damage. We were drowning. But because Daniel saved those 6 men, because no one died, we had a chance to rebuild. And we did. We came back stronger. He tapped the top document. I drafted this 2 months after the accident. A partnership agreement. 20% ownership of Hale Engineering transferred to Daniel Dalton. I sent letters to every construction company in the city trying to track him down. I hired people to search, but he'd moved on to another job, then another. I could never find him. Myra stayed at the papers. Daniel's name. Over and over. I kept searching, Mr. Hale continued. 4 years. I told myself that one day I'd find him, that I'd hand him these papers and tell him what his courage had built. But I never did. And then, 3 years ago, I saw his name in the obituary section of the paper. His voice cracked. I was too late. Myra's throat tightened. She couldn't look away from the documents. But the shares still exist, Mr. Hale said quietly. They were always his. And now they are yours. He pulled out another sheet. A valuation report. Recent. Dated just last week. Hale Engineering today is worth $68 million. Your husband's 20% stake. He slid the paper toward her. Is worth $14.2 million. The room tilted. Myra heard the number, but it didn't land. 14 million. 14 million. The words didn't make sense. She'd been living on $400 a month. Eating ramen in a room above a laundromat. Driving strangers around the city for gas money. And Daniel, her Daniel, had left behind $14 million she never knew existed. Her legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair behind her, breath coming in short, shaking bursts. Her vision blurred. The papers on the desk swam in and out of focus. Mr. Hale knelt beside her, concern flooding his face. Mrs. Dalton, are you okay? Do you need water? She shook her head, unable to speak. Her whole body trembled. 3 years. 3 years of grief and poverty and loneliness. 3 years of believing she'd lost everything. And all this time, Daniel had left her a fortune. A future. A way out. But he never came back to claim it. Why? Why didn't he follow up? Why didn't he tell her? Mr. Hale stood slowly, giving her space. He walked back to the desk and picked up the sealed envelope with Daniel's name written across the front in his own handwriting. Myra, he said gently, his voice barely above a whisper. There's more you need to know. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. What? He hesitated, then handed her the envelope. This was left for you. By Daniel. He wrote it 3 weeks before he died. Myra's hand shook as she took the envelope. Daniel's handwriting, his name written across the front in the careful, deliberate way he used to write important things. She turned it over. The seal was still intact. Where did you get this? Her voice barely came out. Mr. Hale sat down across from her, his expression heavy with something that looked like grief. Daniel came to see me 3 weeks before he died. Myra's head snapped up. What? He found me, Mr. Hale said quietly. After all those years, he tracked me down through the construction union registry. Showed up at this office one afternoon, unannounced. I didn't recognize him at first. 15 years had passed. But when he told me his name, when he mentioned the collapse, I knew. He paused, his eyes distant, like he was seeing that day all over again. I was so happy. After all that time searching, he'd come to me. I brought out the partnership papers immediately, told him about the company, the growth, what his shares were worth. I thought he'd be thrilled, but he just sat there, quiet. And then he asked me not to process the transfer. Myra's chest tightened. Why? He said he didn't do it for money, that he didn't want recognition. He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I'd only reach out to you, and only if I could find you. He said he didn't want his parents involved, didn't want them to know about any of it. Mr. Hale's voice cracked. He knew, Myra. Somehow, he knew they'd try to take it from you. Tears blurred her vision. Daniel had thought of everything, even from the grave. He was protecting her from his family. But there's something else, Mr. Hale said, his tone shifting. Darker. Something about the day he died that the official reports don't say. He pulled out another document. Incident report. Different from the first one. This one was marked internal use only. The scaffolding collapse that killed your husband, he began slowly, happened at a site owned by Dalton Construction, your in-laws' company. Myra's blood ran cold. What? Daniel wasn't supposed to be there that day. He worked for a different contractor. But 3 weeks before he died, right after he came to see me, there was an incident at one of their sites. Structural failure. Unstable debris. The site was condemned, but there were still workers inside trying to salvage equipment. Mr. Hale's hands clenched into fists. Daniel heard about it. He volunteered to help. Off the books. No pay. No record. Just showed up and started clearing debris with a crew that didn't even know who he was. Myra's breath caught. 2 days into the cleanup, there was a secondary collapse. Steel beam gave way. It was going to crush a young worker. Kid, maybe 22 years old. Daniel saw it coming. He didn't run. He pushed the kid out of the way and used his own body to shield him. The room went silent. Myra couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The worker survived, Mr. Hale said, voice breaking. Daniel didn't. Myra doubled over, a sob tearing from her chest. Daniel. Her Daniel. He'd died the same way he'd lived. Saving people. Protecting people. Even when no one was watching. Even when no one would ever know. Mr. Hale reached into the folder one more time and pulled out a handwritten note. Different paper. Different handwriting. Typed letterhead at the top. Dalton Construction. This was filed with the incident report, he said. It's from the site supervisor. He wrote it the day after Daniel died. Myra took it with trembling hands. The words blurred through her tears, but she forced herself to read. Worker refused identification. Insisted on anonymity. Showed extreme negligence by entering unstable zone without clearance. Incident classified as trespassing. No liability assumed by Dalton Construction. Her stomach turned. They knew. Daniel's own family knew he'd died saving someone at their site. And they buried it. Covered it up. Called it trespassing so they wouldn't have to pay his widow a single dollar in insurance or compensation. And 3 days later, they kicked her out of her house and told her she'd brought bad luck into their family. Mr. Hale's voice was soft but firm. I didn't know about this until 6 months ago. I was trying to find records of Daniel's work history so I could locate you. That's when I found the incident report. That's when I realized what they'd done. Myra looked down at the envelope in her lap. Daniel's final words, written 3 weeks before he died, before he went to that site, before he made his last sacrifice. She broke the seal and pulled out a single piece of paper. His handwriting, shaky, rushed, like he'd written it quickly, late at night. Myra, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. I never told you about the things I did because I didn't want you to worry. I didn't want you to think I was reckless. But the truth is, I couldn't walk away when people needed help. I just couldn't. I know my parents don't like you. I know they'll try to take everything if something happens to me. So I made sure there's something they can't touch. Something that's only yours. Mr. Hale has it. Find him. Trust him. He'll take care of you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them. But I protected this. It's yours. All of it. I love you. I always did. Daniel. Myra's body shook with sobs. She clutched the letter to her chest, her heart breaking all over again. He knew. He knew what his family would do. And even in his final weeks, he was still trying to shield her, still trying to save her. Mr. Hale stood and walked to the window, giving her space to grieve. Your husband was the bravest man I ever met, he said quietly, and you deserve to know the truth. When word of Myra's sudden inheritance drifted through the neighborhood like wildfire, it took less than a week for her late husband's family to reappear, this time not with insults, but with soft smiles and trembling voices. Her mother-in-law showed up first, holding a store-bought cake as if sweetness could erase years of cruelty. Her brother-in-law came next, talking loudly about family bonds and fresh starts. Even the cousin who once told her she never belonged in the Dalton name stood on her doorstep, pretending warmth he clearly didn't feel. They circled around the topic with rehearsed subtlety, praising Daniel, praising Myra, praising destiny, until someone finally asked, too casually to be innocent, "So, how much did Daniel leave behind for all of us?" That was a moment Myra's patience ended. She looked at each of them, steady and unshaken. She reminded them they had thrown her out when she had nowhere to go. She reminded them they had treated her like an outsider in her own marriage. She reminded them they had erased Daniel's memory the moment he was gone. Then she stepped back inside, closing the door softly, not out of spite, but out of dignity. A woman who has survived abandonment does not fear walking alone. In the weeks that followed, Myra found herself returning again and again to the quiet office where Mr. Hale opened that steel vault. Every time she looked at Daniel's untouched documents, she felt the same mix of awe and grief. Her husband had carried so much alone, bravery, sacrifice, and a humility so deep it bordered on secrecy. And Mr. Hale, a man Daniel had saved decades ago, had kept a promise long after others had forgotten him. Myra decided she didn't want Daniel's story to end with tragedy or money. She wanted it to end with purpose. With Hale's guidance, she founded the Dalton Rescue Fund, a program offering emergency financial support to workers injured on hazardous job sites, men and women like the ones Daniel had saved. She insisted the fund stay modest, practical, and direct. No luxury offices, no inflated salaries, just real help, delivered quietly, the way Daniel would have wanted. She moved into a small but peaceful apartment near the river, a place where the evening light softened her memories rather than sharpened them. She began visiting training centers, sharing Daniel's story not to gain sympathy, but to remind others that unseen heroism still mattered. Slowly, the weight she carried began to lift. The stranger had kept his promise for 20 years. Daniel's kindness had shaped lives beyond his own, and Myra, at last, understood the depth of the man she loved.